Hi everybody, I'm Robert Strong coming to you from an attic somewhere in Maine. Today I'm going to read to you from Bright Advent, a book of hybrid poetry that resulted from my William Randolph Hearst Fellowship at the American Antiquarian Society in the summer of 2009. I should certainly say that I'm immensely grateful for the expertise and generosity that the Society has lent to my work over these years. My time as a fellow led to my work as the first column editor for Poetic Research at commonplace.org, an immensely fruitful time for me and body of work. And Bright Advent certainly wouldn't have happened without the research that I conducted at the Society. The book was awarded the Marie Alexander Prose Poetry Series Prize and published by White Pine Press, beautifully edited by the intrepid Nicole Brown, and with a generous introduction from Christine DeLucia, the historian Christine DeLucia, whose memory lands King Phillips War and the Place of Violence in the Northeast is out from Yale University Press. Bright Advent is a book of poetry, but it also tells a story, one that takes as its starting point an interesting fact from our history, that the first Bible printed on these shores in the mid-1600s was in fact entirely in the Algonquian language, the so-called Indian Bible or Eliot Bible. The work of translation and attendant missionary work around the publishing of this Bible led up to and no doubt contributed to the beginning of King Phillips War. We have a few characters in the book from history. The Puritan minister John Eliot, who did the bulk of the translation work and the attendant missionary work with the so-called praying Indians. We have the Massachusetts Indian John Sassamon, a linguist and translator who attended Harvard, who was Eliot's main collaborator, among others, in the translation work. We have Metacom, also known as King Philip, the leader and sachem of the Cockenoe. At the end of the war that bears his name, his head ended up on a pike in Plymouth, the village where his father, Massasoit, celebrated what some today call the first Thanksgiving. Robert Boyle, one of the founders of modern chemistry and Boyle's law of gases. He also was a devout Christian who became the president of the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in New England, which funded Eliot's missionary work. We hear a little bit from the Reverend Eliot's wife, Anne Eliot, and one invented, imagined character named Grace Indian from Metacom King Philip's people. So for today, in April 2020, I thought I would read to you a selection from the book of self-isolation. And of course, the self-isolation has some setup in drama that I will begin with. This comes from the section of the book called To Gather a Church. John, Eliot and Sassamon, at the gathering of the praying Indian congregation at Natick, Confessions of Saving Grace to be heard, 1654. And I should say that as with throughout Bright Advent, we get here a fusing of historical source with my own imaginative writing. Eliot speaks. A wonderful providence today at Natick. A majestic pale buck appeared in the street, seeming to approve and improve us all with nature's own knowledge of God, and all agreed. English and Indian. This it was some divine blessing. It was much reassuring to me as a light and precursor, some encouragement before God's fuller test, which was this. Of those to gather, 3 of them had gotten several quarts of strong water, which sundry out of a greedy desire of a little gain are too ready to sell unto them, to the offense and grief of the better sort of Indians, and of the godly English too. With these liquors did not only make themselves drunk, but got a child of 11 years of age, the son of Tote Swamp. The tidings sunk my heart extremely. I did judge it to be the greatest frown of God that ever I met withal in the work. I could read nothing in it but displeasure. I began to doubt our intended work. I knew not what to do. The blackness of the sins and the persons reflected on made my heart fail me. For one of the offenders, though least in offense, was he that hath been my interpreter, whom I have used in translating a good part of the Holy Scriptures. And in that respect, I saw much of Satan's venom, and in God I saw displeasure. For this and some other acts of apostasy at this time, I had thoughts of casting him from that work, yet now the Lord hath found a way to humble him. But his apostasy at this time was a great trial, and I did lay him by for that day of our examination. I used another in his room. Thus Satan aimed at me in this very miscarrying. Now, the historical source is not clear that this interpreter offender at Natick is Sassamon, but it seems to me that it is, and it works well for the dramatic arc of the story that I'm telling in the book, and coincides with the fact that Sassamon himself in the historical record disappears for a couple or a few years after 1654, and having been put in the stocks and then whipped with 20 lashings as part of the punishment for this offense, I would well imagine that Sassamon would want to self-isolate at that point and after his falling out with Eliot. So I imagine him doing so in a way that also helps with one of the byproducts of his genius for language, which I imagine in the book as a sort of visual swirling of language in the air that also indwells quite overwhelmingly often in Sassamon's body. And so by removing himself from Eliot and Massachusetts, he finds a place where he can spend a lot of time out of the air, underwater, and alone. In one of the many serendipities of the research that I conducted at the Antiquarian Society, I discovered that an island that I myself had played on as a child growing up in Long Island Sound, Kuakini Island, was named for and possibly owned by another native translator and linguist, Kuakini de Long Island. And so the conceit in the book at this point is that Sassamon leaves and walks and paddles and portages and walks and paddles until he gets down to Long Island Sound, a small island at the head of Norwalk, just out the Saugatuck River. On a clear day down the Sound, you can see the land pinch to New Amsterdam. Here, what English there are disorganized and interested only in trade. And Kuakini brokered them a good land deal. So you will be left alone to his island, just a rocky sandbar with a few trees, but clams aplenty in the shallows that join the island to the neck that forms the harbor. Lobsters lying about, half asleep. These shallows warmed in the sun at low tide, and you lie there, head propped on a rock, leaving the ears underwater. Sleep like that, leaving the sense of touch and hearing underwater. Closing the eyes and mouth off, smelling the ocean, filling the ears. You sleep using breath only as it was intended for. Breath. Barely that. At dawn, the leaves and oysters let themselves open from peace to fury, the roar of land and ocean and sun rubbing some warmth up, the flat tension of earth's wet rolling. And how has it come about that more than 6 or 7 colors require your attention, that all the old words begin to vibrate and steam upward from where they had settled into? The undimmed fullness of the morn and 1,000 new sounds crowding into the irradiated currents, then, you see, everything should fold into the singular essence of what it was just a second ago in the sun. Good morning, cormorant, you one tuned to cruise currents into silence, whispering only, fish, fish, fish. That's all you need to resurface. When the butt of it is gone, the day full open all over you. The sun comes over the horizon like a ship that now sits dull and obviously over us, drowned by blue. Winter passes, and a winter